All right, welcome to the Explainer. Let me ask you something. What if a regional conflict wasn't just about borders at all? What if it was actually designed to trigger a global economic depression? Today, we are unpacking a really striking analysis that argues exactly that. We're going to explore the calculated shift to economic warfare, the terrifying ladder of escalation, and what it could all mean for the entire world economy. Yeah, this quote right here, it really sets the stage for everything we're about to talk about. We're not talking about a simple downturn, a recession. The analysis we're digging into warns of something far, far more severe, a potential global depression, a crisis that's deeper, longer, and way more painful than anything most of us have ever lived through. So the big question is, how did we get here? To really get a handle on this geoeconomic war, first we have to understand why. According to the source material, one side decided it was time to just throw out the old rulebook. This was a deliberate choice, designed to end the status quo for good. So look, the key thing to understand here is that this isn't about hitting some kind of pause button. From the perspective laid out here, a temporary ceasefire just gives the other side time to rearm and get ready for the next round, which pretty much guarantees you're going to be right back in the same spot down the road. The goal is way more radical, to completely change the security landscape forever. And that brings us to the battlefield itself, which, as you're about to see, has completely changed. Let's take a look at how this thing has moved from a traditional military fight into a battle fought almost entirely on economic grounds. Now, according to the analysis we're breaking down, this shift to economic targets, it wasn't random at all. It was a direct response when Iran's own economy, its industries, even its universities were being hit. The retaliation became symmetrical. It was basically an eye for an eye, right? You hit our economy, we hit yours. Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. You have to see the critical asymmetry here. The source points out that the economic hearts of the neighboring Gulf states, all their most important stuff is packed together right there on the coast. We're talking their oil and gas facilities, their power plants. Basically, it's their economic Achilles heel, just sitting there wide open. Okay, so what does this escalation actually look like on the ground? This next section breaks down the potential steps. You can think of them as rungs on a ladder of conflict, where each step up brings more and more severe consequences. The analysis lays out a pretty clear four-step path. It all kicks off with targeting those economic assets we just talked about, but it climbs fast from there. Step 2 is the potential for the Red Sea to be closed off. Step 3 is mobilizing resistance groups in Iraq. And the final step? A full-blown military response if there's any kind of ground invasion. With each rung you climb, the stakes get higher and higher. Let's zero in on a huge step on that ladder, the direct involvement of Ansar Allah. You might know them as the Houthis from Yemen. The source describes their entry as a total game changer that just blew the economic battlefield wide open. So why is it such a game changer? Well, this number really says it all. Think about this. Between 10 and 15% of all the oil that moves by sea on this planet goes through the Red Sea. It is one of the world's absolute most critical shipping choke points. And suddenly, that choke point is now a hot zone. And look, this is so important to get. We're not just talking about oil here, not by a long shot. We're talking about the grain that feeds people, the fertilizers that grow our food, coal, iron ore, all the stuff that's essential for industry around the world. When you disrupt this route, you're threatening the very foundations of global supply chains. And all of this, it leads us to the most alarming possibility laid out in this analysis: how all these regional moves could actually snowball into a full-blown global economic depression. And let's be crystal clear about what that means. The analysis isn't talking about a quick dip or a short recession that we bounce back from. No. A depression is the kind of long-term, painful downturn in the entire global economy that most people alive today have never, ever had to deal with. Right, so you've got to see this as not one crisis, but three, stacked on top of each other. First, you get an oil crisis. That's bad enough. Then you get an LNG crisis, which is potentially even worse. But the real knockout blow, the one that could be the most critical of all, a fertilizer crisis. I mean, just think about that. A world without fertilizer is a world facing a catastrophic threat to its food supply. Okay, so we've talked about energy, we've talked about food, but the analysis argues the impact goes even deeper. We're talking about a potential shakeup of the entire global financial system. So here's the argument. All these pressures could create what's basically a perfect storm for the US dollar. For decades, oil has been priced in dollars. That's the petrodollar system. But what happens if that system starts to crack? If countries start trading oil in other currencies, and that flood of money stops flowing into U.S. assets? Well, the dollar's dominance on the world stage could take a massive hit. So when you boil it all down, the key takeaway from this analysis is pretty clear. The goal described here is to permanently tear up the old security map of the region. The old way of doing things, where neighbors could be used as a staging ground for attacks, is seen as something that just has to end, for good. And that really leaves us with the billion-dollar question, doesn't it? Are we just watching a really bad but temporary crisis play out? Or are we witnessing the painful, chaotic birth of a brand new world order?